Every Sunday, millions of Americans tune in to hear Pastor Joel Osteen deliver his signature message of positivity and prosperity. His bright smile, polished stage presence, best-selling books, and packed arena tours have made him one of the most recognizable figures in modern American Christianity. For many viewers, he represents a hopeful, uplifting version of faith, a preacher who insists that belief will lead to abundance in all areas of life. But behind that million-dollar smile and carefully shaped public image lies a series of contradictions that have followed Osteen for years. From his luxurious $10.5 million mansion in Houston's most exclusive neighborhood, to the unexplained discovery of cash and checks hidden within church walls, the gap between his public persona and the reality behind it has become increasingly difficult to ignore. Former Lakewood Church employees say that what people see on television is a product, not a person. According to one who worked closely with the Osteen family for more than 5 years, the Joel who speaks about gratitude, simplicity, and sacrifice lives a lifestyle few of his followers could imagine. Religious scholars and longtime observers of American megachurch culture argue that the contradictions are no minor matter. The Sermon on the Mount, they note, is filled with warnings about wealth and materialism. Yet Osteen's ministry repackages Christianity as a pathway to material success while avoiding its more difficult moral challenges. As one religious studies professor put it, the disconnect between wealthy pastors and the homeless carpenter from Nazareth has always existed. But in Osteen's case, it has reached a troubling extreme. That contrast became especially visible during Hurricane Harvey in 2017. When thousands of displaced Houstonians searched for shelter, while Lakewood Church initially remained closed. The backlash was immediate and intense, and it exposed deeper questions about how Osteen's ministry functions behind the scenes. Former employees describe an operation that feels less like a church and more like a corporation, where decisions are guided not by spiritual discernment, but by branding, marketing, and revenue strategy. For many critics, the Harvey incident confirmed suspicions that Osteen's compassion on camera was not matched by similar action when it mattered most. Behind the TV-friendly sermons is a lifestyle that few religious leaders in history have lived. The 17,000-square-foot mansion in River Oaks, containing marble floors, custom woodwork, crystal lighting fixtures, multiple elevators, guest house, and security gates befitting a celebrity compound, belongs to Osteen. Former staffers and contractors say the disconnect between Osteen's preaching and his life is not hard to find. While he preaches about being grateful for small blessings and about humility before God, he moves through a world of private jets, designer clothing, and luxury accessories worth more than what some of his followers bring home in a year. Osteen often reminds his audience that he does not take a salary from Lakewood Church, a line many of his supporters repeat as evidence of his humility. But publishing insiders say his church platform is the very reason his books bring in tens of millions of dollars. It is, they say, like a celebrity claiming they did not take a salary to appear on the cover of a magazine, when in reality the real money was made in publicity from the appearance. Lakewood Church itself, as a tax-exempt religious organization, generates an estimated $70 to $90 million a year, but it does not publish detailed financial statements. Religious scholars say the early Christian church demonstrated radical financial transparency, so no believer lived in need, while the leaders lived in luxury. Lakewood, they say, represents the opposite approach. Many former staff members also describe a church culture centered heavily on giving, where congregants are continually encouraged to donate as an expression of faith. Yet the use of those donations is rarely clear, even to those who worked inside the organization. Some describe a troubling disconnect. People who are struggling financially give sacrificially because they believe they'll receive a blessing in return, while leadership lives in ways completely out of reach for their followers. Critics question the ethics of a system in which those with the least give to support someone who already has the most. Supporters believe that Osteen has earned his wealth through hard work and deserves the rewards that come with success, that his prosperity is evidence that his message is true, that positivity, faith, and gratitude bring real blessings. But theologians counter that the teachings of Jesus were persistently critical of the dangers of wealth in a Christian's life, and that religious faith was never an investment strategy. They say Jesus had a lot to say about how hard it is for rich people to get into God's kingdom. A message rarely, if ever, heard in Osteen sermons. The mystery surrounding Joel Osteen's empire has nothing to do with legal wrongdoing, but with deep contradictions between his message and his lifestyle. As more people question how faith, authenticity, wealth, and leadership should intersect, Osteen's ministry has become symbolic of a larger debate within modern American religion. Whether he is seen as a messenger of hope or a master of marketing depends largely on which version of him people choose to believe: the smiling pastor on television or the man behind the curtain whose world looks very different from the one he describes. When Hurricane Harvey hit the Texas coast in late August 2017 with unprecedented fury, turning Houston into a veritable sea and sending thousands of displaced families searching for shelter, many quickly turned their attention to Lakewood Church, Joel Osteen's former sports arena that had seated 16,800. What happened next became one of the most revealing episodes of Osteen's entire career, shining light on parts of his ministry that years of polished public relations had thus far managed to protect from scrutiny. As floodwaters continued to rise and emergency shelters reached their capacity, social media began to question why Lakewood Church remained shut. Photos surfaced of the church's exterior appearing accessible and largely untouched, contradicting Lakewood's official explanation that the facility was too flooded to open its doors. Houston resident Maria Gonzalez lost her home during the storm and remembers how devastating it felt to watch the city drown while Lakewood's doors remained closed. She said people weren't looking for special treatment just for a massive, empty building to be utilized for safe shelter during a life-threatening crisis. Public outcry soon followed. The contrast was stark. Local news reports contrasting Lakewood's closed doors to the immediate response of smaller churches, mosques, and community centers across Houston that opened without hesitation despite having far fewer resources. Robert Downen, formerly a reporter at the Houston Chronicle, recalled how it quickly became a public relations disaster, made worse because Osteen's preaching continually emphasized generosity, compassion, and Christian love. To many Houstonians, the hesitation felt hypocritical. As criticism mounted, Lakewood Church issued a series of changing explanations. First, they said the building was inaccessible. When photos indicated otherwise, they said the basement had flooded. Only days after the backlash had started, the church finally opened its doors as a distribution center for supplies and, ultimately, as a shelter. Crisis management experts pointed out that such ever-changing statements strongly undermined Osteen's credibility. Had Lakewood opened its doors immediately, even with some type of obstacles, the community would probably have understood. Instead, the late reaction gave the perception that it acted to save its image and not the community. What made matters worse was the initial response by Osteen himself. While Houston was drowning, his social media pages remained on automatic pilot, posting generic inspirational messages, completely oblivious to the disaster unfolding around him. When he finally spoke up, the message felt reactive and forced. Former staff would later reveal that the internal discussion at Lakewood during the crisis focused more on the possible damage to equipment than offering shelter. According to a former facilities manager, church leadership was worried about the millions invested in audio-visual systems, carpeting, and building infrastructure. Others recall early meetings focused on controlling the narrative rather than mobilizing relief efforts. To religious scholars, however, the Harvey episode revealed something more profound than a logistical failure, a contradiction between Osteen's prosperity-focused theology and the fundamental Christian imperatives of sacrifice and service. Prosperity preaching works fine when life is easy, but it has little to say when genuine suffering appears. Critics say that the theology Osteen preaches lacks any framework for putting human need above institutional comfort. Meanwhile, small faith communities all over Houston, as well as a local furniture store owner now celebrated as Mattress Mac, opened their doors in an instant and became models of compassion. Although Lakewood eventually became involved in relief efforts, the damage to Osteen's public image was permanent. Houston was drowning, His doors were locked, became more than a criticism of one decision. It became a symbol of the growing gap between Osteen's messages of hope and the priorities his ministry revealed when tested by real-world crisis. One of the reasons this gap has become so pronounced is Osteen's unique preaching style. What defines his sermons is not what he includes, but what he deliberately leaves out. Traditional Christian preaching addresses sin, moral responsibility, spiritual struggle, and the need for transformation. Osteen, however, presents a carefully filtered version of Christianity centered on positivity, empowerment, and personal blessing. According to theologian Dr. Richard Martinez, Osteen systematically avoids uncomfortable topics like sin, repentance, judgment, and self-sacrifice. Researchers who have studied his sermons notice that whole categories of biblical teaching do not appear at all. This is not an accident. Former Lakewood insiders report that the theology is crafted around what will be appealing to the widest possible audience. Messages that might cause people to feel uncomfortable or call into question a particular lifestyle or a potentially inflammatory social issue are simply eliminated. The aim, according to people with inside knowledge, is not theological truth but audience size. The calculated vagueness carries over into Osteen's public pronouncements on hot-button topics like same-sex marriage, abortion, and racial justice. He does not take stands, thus continuing to appeal to all corners of his worldwide audience. Ethicists argue that this approach sacrifices moral clarity for popularity. Remaining neutral on issues of justice, dignity, and compassion is not simply apolitical. It becomes a moral stance of its own. Historically, Christian teaching has combined both challenge and comfort, presenting moral demands alongside forgiveness. Osteen's message offers the comfort without the challenge, the blessing without the cost. Scholars compare it to serving dessert without ever offering a main course, pleasant, but lacking substance. Many former Lakewood attendees recall the initial attraction of this positivity-driven approach. To those people who had felt weighed down by guilt or judgment in other Christian environments, Osteen's messages came across as a breath of fresh air. Yet over time, some began to feel like something was fundamentally lacking. Any appeal to moral conversion, service to others, or deeper spiritual maturation. Critics from conservative and progressive Christian traditions alike insist that Osteen's message has far more in common with motivational speaking than with historic Christianity. They suggest that while Jesus taught hope and love, he also spoke forcefully about sacrifice, justice, and self-denial. When Jesus spoke about taking up the cross, it was not about your best life now, but about embracing suffering in the name of a greater good. Perhaps the most significant limitation of Osteen's message is the way it deals with suffering. Prosperity theology frames hardship either as a temporary setback or as a consequence of negative thinking. Little room exists within this worldview for the realities of illness, poverty, tragedy, or systemic injustice. To those experiencing real suffering, the message of stay positive and expect your miracle can feel dismissive, even cruel, when the miracle never arrives. In this process of editing out the hard parts of Christian teaching and focusing on self-improvement, Osteen preaches a message perfectly packaged for modern consumer culture. Spirituality without sacrifice, faith without responsibility. As one scholar put it, Osteen has mastered the art of making people feel spiritual but never challenging them to change. It is this mix of allure with avoidance that comprises the crux of the debate over the authenticity of his ministry. Former employees characterize Lakewood Church as an entity that is far more akin to a slick media company than a standard ministry. Behind the flashy lights, the full stadium services, and international broadcasts, they all say there is an extremely well-oiled machine with primary purposes of brand management, audience metrics, and revenue growth. One former senior staff member reports that employees very quickly realized they did not work for a pastor in the normal sense of the word. They were working for a brand, and everything was filtered through how it might strengthen or protect the image of Joel Osteen. This corporate attitude imbues almost every facet of Lakewood's operations. Worship services are stage-managed with the precision of a televised event, and public messaging is tightly controlled. Former marketing consultants recall the pervasive use of focus groups and market research, sometimes on a level that would rival the biggest advertising agencies. They tested sermon topics, book titles, stage design, even what Joel Osteen wears on stage to maximize appeal and eliminate anything potentially provocative. The market-driven strategy extends deeply into the sermons themselves. Instead of the traditional approach found in most Christian traditions, where theological study and spiritual reflection guide the message, former staff say Lakewood treated sermon development like a product creation process. A content team would identify themes that performed well with audience metrics. They assembled uplifting stories, crafted catchy lines, and structured emotional peaks throughout the message to keep viewers engaged. Joel Osteen would then review and personalize the material, but the fundamental framework was shaped by the same goals as any media product: retaining the audience and encouraging actions such as book purchases or increased donations. These accounts give a picture of a ministry that is shaped not fundamentally by theology nor spiritual formation, but by the demands of a global media empire in which faith is entwined with branding, market strategy, and the expectations of a huge international audience.